Good morning slash afternoon slash evening, everyone. Hmm. Let's get one thing straight. Friendliness is not weakness, but being too friendly, that can be. Go jai. We live in a world where being nice is often mistaken for being noble. And while kindness has its place, there's a line, and many of us are crossing it. Constantly saying yes when we mean no, avoiding conflict to keep the peace, sugarcoating truths that need to be said. That's not kindness, it's self sabotage. Being too friendly might feel good in the moment. It wins approval, gets praise, avoids tension, but in the long run, it erodes boundaries. It diminishes respect. And worst of all, it puts everyone else's comfort above your own values. This speech is not a call to be rude, it's a call to be real, authentic, boundaried, assertive, to stop apologizing for existing, for having standards, for saying no. Friendliness should never come at the cost of your self respect. Let's stop hiding behind smiles. Let's start showing up with strength. In today's hyper social and hyper connected world, the expectation to be perpetually agreeable is overwhelming. Many people, consciously or unconsciously, adopt friendliness as a default behavior, smiling through discomfort, agreeing to things they don't want to do, and suppressing their own needs in the name of politeness. This chronic over-friendliness isn't just emotionally taxing, it's a straight path to burnout. It starts as a desire to be liked or to keep the peace, often snowballs into a pattern of self-neglect and exhaustion that few recognize until it's too late. At the core of this issue is a misunderstanding of what it means to be a good person. Society often glorifies the selfless, the endlessly helpful, and the person who never says no. But what's rarely acknowledged is the emotional labor that such a person carries. Constant friendliness requires constant self-monitoring. You're not only trying to meet your own obligations, but you're also managing other people's feelings, needs, and expectations. That's not kindness, that's emotional overload. When you prioritize others' comfort over your own boundaries day after day, you're running a deficit. Over time, this deficit doesn't just drain your emotional energy, it chips away at your sense of identity. You start losing touch with what you want, what you need, and what you believe. The urge to be seen as nice overrides your authentic voice, and eventually you wake up one day wondering why you're so exhausted, frustrated, or even resentful, often at the very people you tried so hard to please. What makes burnout from over-friendliness especially insidious is how invisible it is. Unlike physical exhaustion, emotional fatigue from people-pleasing doesn't always come with clear symptoms. You might still be smiling, you might still be showing up, but inside you feel detached, resentful, and numb. And yet, you keep performing because saying no or setting a boundary now feels like a betrayal of the identity you've built. The helpful one, the agreeable one, the easygoing one. There's also a fear component tied to being too friendly. Many people are afraid that if they stop being overly accommodating, they'll lose relationships, status, or opportunities. This fear is not unfounded. People do often react negatively when you start setting boundaries they're not used to. But the deeper truth is this: any connection that depends on your constant self-erasure is not a healthy one. And if your mental health is the price of admission, it's not worth the ticket. Workplaces are a breeding ground for this kind of burnout. Employees who are always willing to take on more, stay late, or jump in and help are often praised. But behind that praise is an unsustainable workload and a silent expectation that they'll keep saying yes. These same employees rarely feel safe to express burnout, because doing so would break the illusion of the ever-smiling, ever-capable team player. So they internalize stress, and by the time they seek help, if they ever do, it's already become a crisis. Friendliness is supposed to be a social lubricant, not a psychological chain. When your niceness becomes a tool for avoiding conflict or being liked at all costs, it ceases to be generosity. It becomes self-betrayal. True kindness includes kindness to yourself. That means recognizing when you're at your limit, when you need to say no, and when your emotional reserves are running low. No one benefits when your kindness becomes performative, especially not you. The bottom line is this: there is nothing noble about burning yourself out to make others comfortable. While being friendly has value, it should never come at the expense of your health, your voice, or your peace. The cost is simply too high. Boundaries are essential to healthy relationships, both personal and professional. They define where your responsibilities end and someone else's begin. They protect your time, energy, and emotional well being. But when someone is excessively friendly, those boundaries become blurred or even non existent. Over friendliness often looks like being constantly available, always agreeable, and going along with others' wishes, regardless of your own needs or values. In the short term, this might make you likable, but in the long run, it leads to disempowerment and worse, invisibility. People who struggle with setting boundaries often do so from a fear of rejection or disapproval. They equate saying no with being rude, cold, or selfish. As a result, they overcompensate by being too friendly, overly accommodating, emotionally generous, and endlessly flexible. Unfortunately, this friendliness becomes a mask that hides their true thoughts and feelings. They begin to operate not from authenticity but from a desire to be liked. And with every small concession made for the sake of harmony, their own identity begins to fade. The more you ignore your boundaries, the more others will too. If you always say yes to every request, people will assume you're always available. If you never speak up when someone crosses a line, they'll assume there is no line. Over time, this creates a dynamic where you are taken for granted. Not because people are malicious, but because you've trained them through your excessive friendliness that your needs are secondary. It's not about blame, it's about patterns. And over friendliness creates the pattern of self erasure. The erosion of boundaries doesn't always happen through grand gestures. It happens in the small, everyday moments. Agreeing to stay late even when you're exhausted, letting a friend vent for hours without checking in on your own mental state, or tolerating disrespectful behavior because you don't want to make it awkward. These moments, though minor in isolation, accumulate. Each one silently teaches others that your time, energy, and space are always open for use. And before you know it, your life is being managed by everyone but you. This isn't just a personal issue. It spills into professional settings with serious consequences. Overly friendly employees often find themselves with extra workloads, fewer promotions, and more stress. Why? Because they're seen as dependable, not because they're respected, but because they rarely push back. They become the default problem solvers, the ones who pick up the slack, the ones who never say no. And while their intentions may be good, the reward is often exploitation, masked as appreciation. The danger of eroded boundaries is just external. It creates internal conflict as well. You begin to feel resentful, but you don't feel justified in your resentment because technically you agreed to everything. You start questioning your worth, wondering why people don't respect you, even though you've tried so hard to be nice. The dissonance between how you present yourself and how you truly feel starts to grow. And eventually it manifests in emotional exhaustion, anxiety, and even a loss of self-esteem. What makes this cycle so damaging is that it often begins with good intentions. You want to be liked, helpful, and easy to be around. But in the process, you teach others that your time, your space, and even your feelings are negotiable. Over friendliness becomes a kind of silent contract, one where you provide comfort at the cost of your own clarity and agency. And the longer you uphold this contract, the harder it becomes to rewrite. Boundaries are not walls, they are rules of engagement. They don't push people away. They tell people how to engage with you in a respectful, healthy way. When you're too friendly, you stop enforcing those rules. And when there are no rules, people play the game however they like. If you want to be respected, you need to stop equating boundaries with selfishness and start seeing them as self-preservation. Because without boundaries, over-friendliness doesn't just cost you comfort, it costs you control over your own life. In a world that rewards compliance and cooperation, saying yes is often seen as a virtue. We are taught from an early age that agreeing, helping, and being available are marks of a good person. But what's rarely discussed is the hidden cost of always saying yes. Every time you agree to something you don't truly want, you're not just being nice, you're making a trade. That trade comes at the expense of your own time, energy, goals, and sometimes even your integrity. You are saying no to something within yourself. Your needs, your boundaries, your peace. Saying yes too often creates an illusion of generosity, but in reality it is often driven by fear. Fear of disappointing others, fear of missing out, fear of conflict, or fear of being seen as unkind or uncooperative. This fear-based behavior can easily become a habit. Once you start saying yes reflectively, it becomes difficult to stop. It becomes your identity. the helpful one, the agreeable one, the reliable. But this identity isn't rooted in authenticity, it's rooted in sacrifice. And over time, that sacrifice becomes unsustainable. What's worse is that the more you say yes, the more is asked of you. People naturally gravitate toward those who never say no. You become the go-to person, not because you're the best fit for every task or the most interested party, but because you're always available. You end up carrying responsibilities that were never yours to begin with, often at the expense of your personal goals and well-being. And the irony? People rarely recognize the internal cost you're paying. They just see you as someone who can handle more. Every yes should be a conscious decision, not a default response. When your default is to agree, you're not just opening your schedule to others, you're closing doors to yourself. That project you wanted to start, no time. That rest you needed, not today. That boundary you tried to set, it gets pushed aside to accommodate yet another request. The more you say yes externally, the more you silence your internal voice, the one that knows when you're stretched too thin or when your values are being compromised. This kind of people-pleasing isn't just about being nice. It's about abandoning your own priorities. It fosters a deep internal conflict, one where your actions don't align with your desires. You begin to feel a subtle, creeping resentment. At first, it might be directed toward others, but over time, it turns inward. You blame yourself for not speaking up, for not pushing back, for not protecting your time and energy. It becomes a cycle of overcommitting and self-resentment that chips away at your confidence and mental clarity. Another overlooked consequence of always saying yes is the dilution of your value. When you agree to everything, your contributions lose meaning. People stop seeing your time as precious because you've taught them it's always available. And when everything is a priority, nothing truly is. By constantly bending to fit others' expectations, you become forgettable, not because you're incapable, but because you've stopped standing for anything that is uniquely yours. Learning to say no is not about becoming difficult or unhelpful, it's about alignment. It's about honoring your time and energy as limited resources. Saying no allows you to conserve your strength for the things that actually matter to you. It doesn't mean closing yourself off to others. It means creating the space to show up in ways that are genuine and sustainable. You can't give from an empty cup, and the more you say yes to things that drain you, the less you have to offer where it really counts. Ultimately, every yes is a commitment, and every commitment has a cost. When you say yes too freely, you're writing checks that your well-being can't always cash. It's not selfish to be selective with your time, it's responsible. It's not rude to prioritize your needs, it's necessary. Saying no isn't rejection, it's redirection. It's a way of saying yes to yourself, your goals, your peace, your boundaries, and that's a voice worth listening to. Niceness is often mistaken for the foundation of good relationships. It's polite, agreeable, and socially acceptable, and people generally respond well to it. But there's a key difference between being nice and being authentic. Niceness is surface level. It keeps things smooth, avoids discomfort, and tells people what they want to hear. Authenticity, on the other hand, goes deeper. It's grounded in truth, self-respect, and emotional honesty. And while it may not always be easy or comfortable, it is what builds relationships that are resilient, meaningful, and real. When you rely on niceness to manage your relationships, you're essentially performing. You filter your words, suppress your opinions, and cater to others' expectations, often at the expense of your own needs. While this may keep the peace in the short term, it doesn't foster trust. People may like you, but they don't really know you, because you're not letting yourself be fully seen. Niceness creates distance, masked as connection. Authenticity creates true intimacy and mutual respect. Real connection can't exist without truth. If you're always smiling when you're actually upset, or agreeing when you disagree, people might see you as agreeable, but they won't feel close to you. Closeness doesn't come from sameness or smoothness. It comes from vulnerability. It comes from showing your real thoughts, your real values, and even your discomfort. When you are authentic, you give others permission to be authentic too. That mutual openness creates a bond that no amount of surface level politeness can replicate. One of the biggest risks of prioritizing niceness over authenticity is that it attracts people who like the version of you that is created to please them, not the real you. This creates fragile relationships based on performance, not truth. The moment you stop performing, The moment you express a differing opinion, assert a boundary, or show a side of yourself that isn't convenient, those relationships may crack. In contrast, authenticity may repel a few people at first, but the ones who stay are the ones who genuinely align with who you are. Another downside to niceness is that it often prevents growth, both yours and others. When you avoid difficult conversations or fail to give honest feedback out of fear of making someone uncomfortable, you rob them of the opportunity to reflect and improve. Constructive confrontation delivered with respect is not cruelty, it's care. It takes courage to challenge someone when necessary, and it takes integrity to tell the truth even when it's not what someone wants to hear. Niceness often avoids conflict. Authenticity engages with it productively. It's also important to recognize that authenticity doesn't mean being blunt or harsh. It doesn't mean saying whatever you want, however you want, without regard for others. Authenticity can and should be grounded in empathy. It's not about being brutally honest. It's about being respectfully real. It means sharing your truth while holding space for someone else's. That kind of presence, balanced, honest, and human, is what creates deep trust. People feel safe not because you always agree, but because they know you're consistent and genuine. Niceness may keep things pleasant, but it often comes at the cost of clarity. People may walk away from a conversation with a nice person feeling good but confused, unsure where they actually stand. Authentic people, by contrast, bring clarity. You may not always like what they say, but you know where they stand. You know what they value. You don't have to second guess their intentions because they communicate with honesty and integrity. That clarity is what makes relationships functional and dependable. In the long run, authenticity is more sustainable than niceness is. Niceness requires constant effort to maintain an image and avoid conflict. It's emotionally exhausting and often unrewarding. Authenticity, while it may require courage and discomfort, ultimately allows you to relax into who you are. You don't have to keep up a front or memorize your lines. You just have to show up as yourself. And the relationships that flourish in that space are the ones that truly matter. Conflict is often viewed as something negative, an uncomfortable, messy disruption we should all strive to avoid. From childhood, many of us are taught to keep the peace, to avoid arguing, to be the bigger person. While the intention behind these lessons may be noble, the outcome is often damaging. When we avoid conflict at all costs, we also avoid clarity, progress, and necessary transformation. Conflict, when handled constructively, is not destruction, it's a catalyst for growth. Avoiding it doesn't protect relationships. It often weakens them from within. The problem with excessive friendliness is that it tends to suppress disagreement. When you're too focused on being liked or avoiding discomfort, you stop expressing your true thoughts and feelings. You nod when you want to speak up. You smile when you're actually bothered. You accept what feels wrong just to avoid the potential tension of saying, I disagree. This form of self-silencing may feel like kindness or diplomacy, but it's actually a quiet act of self-betrayal. And over time, it builds internal tension that can become explosive. Avoiding conflict doesn't make problems go away. It only pushes them beneath the surface. Issues that aren't addressed don't resolve. They fester. In workplaces, this leads to team dysfunction. In friendships, it leads to resentment. In romantic relationships, it leads to emotional distance. All because one or both parties were too afraid to face the temporary discomfort of a difficult conversation. By postponing that tension, the eventual fallout becomes much worse. Conflict, when left unspoken, doesn't disappear. It transforms into bitterness, disconnection, or silence. Growth, whether personal, relational, or organizational, requires friction. It's in the challenging conversations where truth is uncovered, new ideas emerge, and behavior changes. But when we prioritize being agreeable over being honest, we rob ourselves and others of the opportunity to evolve. Telling someone a hard truth, questioning a flawed system, or asserting your needs is not an act of aggression. It's an act of integrity. It's a sign that you care enough to confront what isn't working instead of pretending everything is fine. One of the greatest misunderstandings about conflict is that it's inherently disrespectful. In reality, silence can be more harmful. When people avoid conflict, they often allow toxic behavior to continue unchecked, whether it's a disrespectful coworker, a neglectful partner, or an unhealthy family dynamic. Friendly silence may feel less confrontational, but it enables harm. Speaking up, even with a shaking voice, is often the first step in demanding better for yourself and others. And there's not disrespect, that's responsibility. Conflict avoidance is also deeply tied to fear. Fear of rejection, fear of retaliation, fear of being misunderstood. These fears are valid, but they should not dictate your behavior. The discomfort of conflict is temporary, but the cost of avoiding it can be long-lasting. The more you train yourself to face it with composure and clarity, the more confident you become in handling life's inevitable challenges. Growth happens in discomfort, not in denial. You cannot expand your life by shrinking from difficult moments. Ironically, healthy conflict can strengthen relationships. When two people are willing to engage in open, honest dialogue, even when it's hard, it signals mutual respect. It means the relationship can handle tension. It means both people trust each other enough to be real. These conversations may be uncomfortable, but they deepen connection by building understanding. They reveal values, address misunderstandings, and create space for mutual compromise. In contrast, fake harmony, driven by fear and over-friendliness, leaves everyone walking on eggshells. Ultimately, growth is not possible in a space where truth is unwelcome. Conflict isn't the enemy of peace, avoidance is. Peace without truth is just a pause, not a resolution. If you want to grow as a person, a leader, a partner, or a friend, you have to stop treating conflict like a threat. You have to stop hiding behind smiles and start leaning into the discomfort of honesty. Because growth doesn't come from pretending everything is fine, it comes from having the courage to face what isn't. Emotional labor, the invisible effort of managing emotions, offering support, maintaining harmony, and ensuring others feel heard and cared for, is often silently carried by those who are overly friendly. This kind of labor is frequently overlooked and undervalued, especially when it becomes one-sided. In relationships, workplaces, and families, there is often an imbalance. One person becomes the emotional caretaker, the constant soother, the dependable listener. And while these roles may appear generous and kind on the surface, they become deeply exhausting when not reciprocated. No one should be expected to carry the emotional weight for everyone else, while neglecting their own. Over-friendliness often leads people into these roles without them even realizing it. Because they present themselves as approachable, endlessly patient, and always willing to help, they attract others who offload their emotional baggage freely. These individuals become emotional sponges, absorbing stress, complaints, insecurities, and conflict from others while hiding their own pain. Over time, they lose track of their own emotional needs, becoming containers for others' feelings while being denied the space to express their own. They listen but are rarely heard. They comfort but are rarely comforted. This dynamic isn't sustainable. Constantly being the strong one or the understanding one creates burnout. When emotional labor isn't mutual, it becomes a form of quiet exploitation. Even if unintentional, people begin to rely on your steadiness without asking whether you too need support. It becomes assumed that you're fine, that you can handle more, that your needs are somehow less urgent. This assumption is dangerous. It reduces a person to a function, the fixer, the helper, the peacekeeper, and being seen only in that way strips away one's full humanity. What makes one-sided emotional labor especially damaging is that it's often rewarded with superficial praise. You're so kind. You're always there for everyone. You're the glue that holds everything together. But beneath those compliments is a subtle message. Your value comes from what you do for others, not who you are. And the moment you stop performing that emotional role, you risk being seen as difficult, selfish, or cold. This creates a toxic bind where you feel trapped by the identity others have built around your constant emotional availability. Mutual emotional labor is the foundation of truly healthy relationships. Everyone deserves to feel supported, heard, and emotionally safe, not just the ones who are best at hiding their pain. In balanced relationships, emotional care flows both ways. You are allowed to lean on others, to ask for comfort, to express your anger or sadness without fear of being seen as a burden. When that mutuality exists, emotional labor becomes an act of connection, not a burden. It creates trust, resilience, and reciprocity. But without balance, the person always giving ends up emotionally depleted and alone. Part of why over-friendly people get stuck in this dynamic is because they fear letting others down. They've internalized the idea that saying, I'm not okay or I need space is somehow letting people down or creating discomfort. So they push through exhaustion, continue to perform empathy, and stay emotionally open long after their limits have been reached. This leads to quiet suffering, the kind that goes unnoticed by others because it's buried under a smile and a calm voice. But emotional labor shouldn't require you to erase your own needs just to meet others. Breaking this cycle requires redefining what emotional strength looks like. It's not about how much you can carry for others. It's about knowing when to ask for help, when to rest, and when to set limits. Real strength includes vulnerability. It includes saying, I can't take this on right now, or I need someone to be there for me too. It means acknowledging that your well-being matters just as much as anyone else's. And that recognition is not a weakness, it's a necessary act of self-respect. If emotional labor is not mutual, it stops being care and becomes self-sacrifice. And self-sacrifice, when done repeatedly and silently, becomes a slow form of self-erasure. Over-friendliness tricks you into believing that your worth comes from being endlessly emotionally available to others. But the truth is, your worth is not measured by your ability to carry everyone else's pain. You are allowed to feel, to rest, to step back, and to be supported, not just support others. Emotional labor is only healthy when it flows both ways. One of the most pervasive lies in modern society is that our worth is tied to how well liked we are. From early childhood, we're conditioned to believe that being agreeable, pleasant, and easy to get along with is the golden ticket to acceptance, love, and opportunity. We are praised when we smile, encouraged when we make others feel comfortably, and often rewarded socially or professionally for maintaining likability at all costs. This deep-rooted belief pushes many people, especially those prone to over-friendliness, into shaping their behavior around others' approval rather than their own values and identity. But likability is an unstable and ever-shifting measure of worth. It is dependent on context, culture, and perception, all factors that are outside your control. What one person admires, another might find irritating. What is considered polite in one setting may be viewed as insincere in another. Trying to base your sense of self-worth on how others feel about you is not only exhausting, it is impossible. You end up chasing an illusion, the idea that if you just behave the right way, say the right things, or hide the wrong parts of yourself, everyone will like you. And in that likability, you'll find peace. But peace doesn't live there. When you make being liked your main goal, you lose sight of who you are. You begin to perform crafting a version of yourself that conforms to what others want or expect. You filter your personality, suppress your opinions, and stay silent in moments when you should speak up. You become so focused on being palatable that you stop being authentic. And while this may win you temporary approval, it leaves you feeling disconnected from your own identity. You become liked, perhaps, but not known, not even to yourself. What's more, tying your value to likability puts you in a perpetual state of self-monitoring. You question your every move. Was that joke too much? Did they take that comment the wrong way? Should I have smiled more? You become hyper-aware of how others react to you, constantly reading the room, adjusting your behavior, and censoring your truth. This mental burden is enormous. It creates anxiety, insecurity, and self-doubt. Instead of living freely, you live to please. And that's a cage, not a life. Likability is also fragile. The moment you assert a boundary, say something unpopular, or stop agreeing with everything, that approval can vanish. People who only like you when you're easy to control or manipulate never truly respected you. True respect isn't based on how convenient you are to others. It's based on consistency, integrity, and authenticity. Being true to yourself may alienate some people, but it also draws in those who genuinely align with you, not just the version of you that's trying to please everyone. You are not here to be liked. You're here to live, to grow, to speak, to act with purpose and principle. Likability is not the same as kindness. It's possible to be kind without constantly shrinking yourself to fit others' expectations. Being kind doesn't mean being agreeable all the time. It means acting from compassion, truth, and strength. When you prioritize being liked over being kind or being real, you fall into patterns of people-pleasing that leave you resentful, depleted, and unseen. Valuing yourself requires stepping out of this pattern. It means recognizing that your worth is not conditional, not based on who approves of you or who finds you pleasant. It is inherent. You do not need to mold yourself into someone else's ideal to deserve dignity, respect, or love. The more you ground yourself in your values, your voice, and your vision, the less concerned you'll be with who likes you. because you'll know who you are. That kind of self-assurance is not arrogance, it's liberation. The most magnetic people are not those who are universally liked. They are those who are unapologetically themselves. They speak their truth. They take up space. They allow themselves to be seen, even if it makes others uncomfortable. And in doing so, they give others permission to do the same. When you stop chasing likability and start embodying authenticity, you reclaim your power. You stop asking the world for permission to exist, and you start living as though your presence as it is already enough. At some point, you have to decide who you're really living for. The endless crowd of people you're trying to please, or the one person you actually have to live with every day, yourself. Being overly friendly, agreeable, or nice may win temporary validation, but it will cost you authenticity, boundaries, and peace of mind. You weren't made to be everyone's comfort zone. You were made to think, to feel, to challenge, to grow, and to exist unapologetically. And that doesn't mean being rude or cold, it means being real. Stop sacrificing your truth for approval. Stop overextending yourself to earn the affection of people who only value your silence and your service. Start honoring your limits. Speak clearly even when your voice shakes. Stand firm even when it makes others uncomfortable. The goal is not to be liked by everyone, it's to be respected by the right ones, and more importantly, to respect yourself. Because in the end, it's not about being liked. It's about being free,